Hi friends, it's Unicorn, and today I'm very happy to bring you the review and wrap up of the books I read for the first round of BookTube Prize 2021. I know I'm like a month late, but I wanted to do a written review for each of the book I read before I do this video wrap up. So I'm happy to say that the detailed reviews of each individual book are all up on my blog. Links down below if you want to check it out. And in this video, I want to talk more about my feelings towards each book in the order of my least favorite to the most favorite. But before we begin, the From and About Asia reading project are kicking out in a few days on the 1st of May, and we will be reading books all about North Korea and the culture of East Asia. So if you haven't checked it out yet, the announcement video, recommendation video, Discord, and the webpage are all down below as well. And back to the BookTube Prize. In the first round, I was judging for fictional group C, and there are 6 books in total. I only didn't really enjoy one of them, and the other 5 books are all awesome. I gave 3 stars or above. It's very hard to rank them against each other, but I did find one of my favorite reads so far this year, so I'm really happy with the result. And without further ado, let's dive into the books. So my least favorite of the bunch is this Leave the World Behind by Yuma Alam. This is a thriller that started with an ordinary day. A white middle-class family went on a road trip. They rented a house in the middle of nowhere and wanted to spend some quality vacation time together as a family. But in the middle of the first night, an elderly black couple knocked on the door and claiming they're the owner of the rented house, and they needed to stay here because there's a mysterious blackout in the city. Strange things started to happen, and because of the house is in the middle of nowhere and because of the blackout, the two families have no ways to contact with the outside world nor to figure out what exactly happened. And the premise of the book is really intriguing, and you can see the author spent a lot of effort to create this mysterious atmosphere. The core of the story just cannot support what built for it, and after reading the book, I find myself wondering what it is about. And also, some of the behaviors of the characters I just cannot understand. Not something simple like miscommunication, although that did happen in the book, but for example, there's one scene. By the way, I don't think it's a spoiler, but the scene is about the boys in the younger family. His teeth started to fall off one by one, and eventually his mouth is full of blood. But instead of going to the doctor, the younger couple was like, okay, let's just not. And they just stay inside. And I understand the author was trying to show the readers that this outside world is somehow more dangerous than the inside, so that's why that happened. But because nothing was really built up for it, so the behavior seems really unnatural for me at least. Besides the story, the author also tried to discuss things like social issues, racial justice, and the trust among people, but because it doesn't really have a good support, the discussion from the narrator's perspective feel very blank and very tedious, especially the female character in the younger couple. Like, her narration provides like no insights at all, just makes her a very neglectful and likable character. So as you can tell, I didn't really enjoy this book. I give it a 2.5 stars. The next book on the list is Run Me to Earth by Paul Yong. This is a book, in my opinion, has great potentials, so that's why I'm a little bit disappointed with it as well, but I still liked it a lot. It is a historical fiction set in the late 1960s to the beginning of 1970s, and we followed 3 orphans during the Laotian Civil War when they met a doctor and started to run errands for him. During the whole book, we see the separation and the reunite of the characters and how people lived in terror. I loved this book because how precisely it captured the humanity when people are living in such a desperate situations and also in a system that demolishing humanity. And not even the main characters, but also every single side characters is greatly written. And with the writing, you really feel their pain. And if we meet people who has a little bit privilege during that time, you can feel their fake pride somehow. There's so many great scenes in this book I feel like were written amazingly. And I remember clearly one of them is describe how people eat after they've been in starvation for the longest time. and the illustration of the book just capture them so vividly that makes you feel like you're in a movie, and that's how impressive it is. However, the reason why I rank this book number 5 on the list, despite how much I love the writing, the theme, the subject matter, is because somehow it still feels lacking. The rich historical background was sometimes told to the reader at a third voice kind of perspective, which I feel is very unnecessary, and you can find a way to blend them in with the story, with the characters so easily with all the settings. And also, I wasn't really satisfied with the ending of the book, not how it ends, but how it's presented. We gotta see the fate of each characters, but it was written in a jumping timeline format, so I feel like a lot of the key element and the events that turns the fate of the characters was missing in those jumps, which I'm so curious to read about. So overall, my thought of the book is I wish it's a lot longer and a lot more developed. I really wish a book was longer, but this is an exception because it has great potentials, and I just want to read more about it. The book at the 4th place on my ranking is an unpopular opinion of mine, and I know it was loved by so many people, but yeah, it's Hamlet by Maggie O'Farrell. This book also won the Women's Prize for Fiction last year, and it was so many people's favorite book of 2020. And it was so beautifully written, but in my opinion, this is a beautifully written flat book. This novel is about the story of the family of Shakespeare, but not about Shakespeare. In fact, Shakespeare's name was never mentioned once in the book. And this is where my first issue with the book came in, because when reading the book, I feel like you have to know that that character is Shakespeare in order to make him alive in your mind, because he was portrayed so flat and so boring. Even though if you treated him as a side character, like a normal side character without knowing him, he's not a very good one. And I know that Shakespeare wasn't the focus and the emphasis in this novel, and the author was trying to put all the focus on the family side of him, but it bothers me so much that how not a very good side character we have in the book, who's like presented and supposed to be important to the story, but not really, you know. Especially when the hidden of Shakespeare's identity doesn't really work, because even though you don't tell people that's Shakespeare in the book, you advertise it everywhere. So I don't really know why they did that. It doesn't make sense to me. And back to the story started with the boy Hamlet exploring the house by himself one afternoon. And for some reason, I just couldn't pick up my interest for the first part of the novel, and it feels so long and so dragging, even though it jumps timeline back and forth and narrated the whole family structure and things, but I wasn't really interested and cannot invest it in the story. However, with the story moving on, things did pick up a lot once we know more about Shakespeare's wife Agnes and also see things more from her perspective. It gets a lot more exciting than before. But at the same time, a lot of her personalities and abilities are too easy and too underdeveloped, especially some of her abilities doesn't really fit in the format of a historical fiction, and it just feels like too easy to be there. But with that being said, I did rank this book higher than Run Me to Earth. The reason why is being that this book is getting more and more exciting, so it's a book that going up compared to Run Me to Earth is a book that kind of like going down. It's very hard to compare them against each other, but that's the reasoning of the ranking. And also this book was so lyrical and so poetic, the atmosphere and all the things. So that's a big advantages of this book. Moving on, the book at the 3rd place is What Are You Going Through by Sigrid Nunez. This is a book talking about the narrator who has a friend who's dying from terminal cancer, and she decided to cope with her friend in the last journey of her life. And in the meantime, the narrator met different kind of people who's like going through different things, and she think a lot. The people she met varies, so the things that they went through are all different. From the people she's very close to or used to be very close to the people that she met only once or even didn't talk to. This book discussed the topics like grieving and death and the nostalgia of the past time, past people, and past pets in a very light-hearted way. We live in the mind of the narrator and followed her observation of different people she encountered, and it really makes you think that what different things people are going through and makes you want to be kind to each other. The writing was extremely fluent. Although we are wandering in the narrator's mind, we don't really get lost like some of the books with similar formula do to us, and everything the narrator picks up makes sense to the center of the story. And overall, it was a very enjoyable and very relaxing read despite the subject matters, and I liked it a lot. Next, we have two books that I loved both so much, and came at the second place is The Death of Vivek Oji by Akwake Imaji. This is an amazing novel set in Nigeria, where the dead body of Vivek Oji was dropped at the front door of the house, naked and brutally dead. People around Vivek were in shock and tried to figure out what happened. The story was unfolding with the mystery of how Vivek died, so we gotta see more Vivek as a person in later on. But that was not the sole focus of the novel. I like how it paints us a vivid picture of the traditional value and the culture by following two narrators from two different generations, the mother and the cousin. So the different worldview that the two generations has sparks some great interaction and great conflict among characters. Besides the event that happens within the family, I loved the group portrait that the book did to the community. I especially loved a group of people who are called Niger wives, meaning that they were foreign-born women who married to Nigerian men and formed a family. I loved reading how they support each other in a culture that was not necessarily carried their own traditional values, but they try to protect each other from it. And if you're a foreigner living in a foreign country as me, I think it will remind you of those communities that you met when you first came to the new country. However, I was really curious about them and wanted to read more about them, but because the book was not focused on the Niger wives, so my curiosity was not fulfilled. So that was one of my critiques to the book. I wish the book write more about the culture of the community and expand the scope of the death and make them tighter. My other critique to the book is at the beginning when it tries to introduce us to the family, the pacing was a little bit slow. So I had to be really focused on reading that to keep myself concentrated. But it wasn't so bad at all. It picked up really quickly. So overall, I enjoyed a lot of this book and I really loved it. Finally, we're gonna talk about my favorite book of the pile, which is also my favorite fictional reading of this year so far. And I'm so happy I read this. It is A Girl is a Body of Water by Jennifer Mansabuka Makubi, which is also called The First Woman in the UK edition. This is a historical fiction and also a coming-of-age story set in Uganda in the 1970s. We followed a girl called Karabo when she was 12 until she was 19 and became a brilliant young woman. Karabo lived with her grandparents from her dad's side, and she never got to know who her mom is, so to find out her mom's identity became one of the main driven motivations in Karabo's life. And I just love to read everything about her and see how she evolved into the brilliant young woman during the years and see what she learned. This book is very rich in history and local cultures. It discusses all sorts of important subject matters in a seamless way. For example, even a play scene between Karabo and her childhood friend can be a discussion about exploitation, slavery, colorism, and hierarchy. But it wasn't a textbook-like presentation of those issues and show you all the problems. The subject matters are hidden cleverly in the most innocent and most childish conversations between two friends and left you as a reader to think a lot about afterwards. In some way, I feel like all the fictional novels should be like that when discussing things like that. And I loved reading about the characters in the book. There are a lot of people in the book, but every side character is well-rounded and fascinating to read about. The dynamic between them are amazing, and again, the more you think about it, the more you take out from the book. It just never dries out. Feminism is a very important and central topic of this book, and it was delivered in different perspectives and different aspects, from the mythology of their culture to the women's life in Carabo's clan, to even the people who imported the Western ideas of feminism. From the using of their language, you can see how their idea evolved during time. Women silencing and misogyny is constantly practiced in their culture, just as our society today. But I just love reading about how the characters learn and adapt feminist ideas into their lives and how that affects their behaviors. In the background, the story was set in the Idi Amin region, where a lot of peoples are living a terrified and frightened life. And that was another element of the history that cleverly blended in with the story of Carabo's. And the writing of this book is just so beautiful and clean and smart. I think this book is over 500 pages. Yeah, it's like 544 pages on my edition, but every page is worth reading. Every page is an enjoyment when you read it. I just cannot find a single thing that I don't really like about the book. So I'm really grateful that I had this chance to judge it and have this chance to read it. And that's all the books I have in this group and my reviews. I know I am a little bit late, but I'm sure you don't mind it. So let me know if there's any books that you read or books on your radar. Say hi in the comment section down below. Thumbs up to this video if you liked it. I hope you're happy reading, stay healthy. I'll see you in my next bookish video. Bye!